Grace to you and peace. My name is Steve Shusett, and I am the stated clerk of the Presbytery of the Highlands, and I welcome you to this Reviewing the Minute Review Sheet video. This is your chance to hear what I'm looking for when I have to review minutes, either because your reviewer raised a question, or your minutes and review form arrived later in the process and someone has to review them, or because they are particularly complicated for some reason. To be honest, one of your peer reviewers, that is, one of your fellow clerks of session, may be less picky than I am in reviewing. That isn't always the case, but it's often the case. So I suggest that you get your minutes in a timely fashion and try to make them as easy to read as possible. You can look forward to getting seeing the updated review form and minute manual on the Presbytery's website by the end of the month. But because of other responsibilities that clerks have at the end of the year and the beginning of the year, we won't be sending these new materials out until mid-February. That's still plenty of time, given that your December minutes aren't official until they're approved at the first meeting of the new year anyway. So you have plenty of time to do this. There are three different ways in which you'll be able to have your minutes reviewed. First, digitally. Scan your minutes, send the completed worksheet and minutes in, and email them to the Presbytery office. You need to scan your minutes and the review sheet and send them both in. Your PDF minutes and worksheet will then be sent to another clerk for review, and you'll receive a set of minutes and a review form to review. So again, you want to send both minutes and review form. You'll get both minutes and a review form back. Your minutes have to have page numbers on them. And I'll mention this again shortly, but just keep in mind, the page numbers that are on the minutes for review don't have to necessarily be the page numbers that you'll be using when you put your minutes in your permanent record. These page numbers really are just for us to be able to find materials for the review. Minutes will not be accepted without a completed worksheet. If you send your minutes in without the worksheet, we keep them on file. We'll remind you every once in a while that you still have to send your worksheet in, but they will not be reviewed until we have both the minutes and the worksheet. The deadline to submit your materials by PDF, both minutes and worksheet have to be in the Presbytery office by May 19th. And the review deadline, that is, when you have to have your review done of someone else's minutes and review form, is June 1st. Secondly, you can partner with another clerk. If you'd like to use this method, if you have a friend who's a clerk and you two just want to get together and have lunch and chat and review the minutes, knock yourselves out. It can be more than two of you. But you are responsible for making that happen. The Presbytery office will not organize that. Again, once you have partnered with another clerk, you've reviewed their minutes, they've reviewed your minutes, submit your completed worksheet to the office. The submission deadline for completed worksheets is, once again, June 1st. And finally, you can do your review in person in a large group gathering that the Presbytery will organize. The date, time, and places are yet to be determined, and there'll be just one of these opportunities. You have to RSVP that you'll be attending, and you have to arrive on time. Because if you come in late, someone else has to stay late. If you come in late, all of the minutes for a review may have been assigned to a different partner. You'd have nothing to do, and someone has to stay late to make sure that your minutes that arrived late are properly reviewed. So really, please be on time. Bring your minute book and your church register along with the completed worksheet. We'll send out information when we have the time, date, and place identified, and there'll be a registration for you to fill out. And if you fill it out, we'll know that you'd like to come. And if not enough people sign up for this opportunity, then we will cancel it and let you know, and then arrange to have you partnered with someone else in a different fashion. So when that registration comes out, please register at your earliest opportunity, just so that we know that there's interest. For those of you who are new, it is your obligation to fill out this review form before you have your minutes reviewed. Please don't come in with a blank form intending to fill it out at the group gathering. If you're watching this video and at the end you're still not quite sure how to fill it out, please give me a call, send me an email, reach out and make a new friend with a neighboring clerk. Again, here you see reference to page numbers, and that was what that blank line is for. And so you would see that the meeting is opened with prayer. There's the book of order citation telling you why that has to happen. And then in that blank line, you only have to provide 2 page numbers. And you can go with the first 2 meetings of the year. You can put in whatever 2 meetings you want, where the meeting is opening with prayer, where the date, hour, type, and place of meeting is recorded. And we are only asking for 2 because I'm going to trust that if you have done it in 2 places, you've probably done it in all of your meetings. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and save your reviewer some time from having to check perhaps 12 places where you open the meeting with prayer. And these are all pretty straightforward questions. But remember, if you don't put in 2 places, then your reviewer has to hunt for it, or they can end up having to hunt for it. And what you don't want is an irritated reviewer. The reason we need the page numbers consecutively numbered is so that people can track to find the material that you've provided. If there are numbers or if they're misnumbered because of any number of reasons, it makes it very challenging for the reviewer. So please, consecutive numbers. Again, you can start with 1. You can hand number them before you scan them and just put 1 to 55, and that's perfectly fine, as long as they can find page 13 when they're looking for the approval of the prior meeting's minutes. You need to make sure you include the names not only of those present and absent, and also those excused, because you need to know who was there. Because according to Roberts, when they come to the next meeting, their ability to take an action or make a motion on a previous item depends on whether they were there to speak to it at the previous meeting. So you need to know who was there. To the point that if someone has another obligation and therefore they're only there for half the meeting, if they leave at 7:47, your minutes should reflect that. I would bring attention, I think to items 5 and 6, which are frequently missed or put as not applicable. There is no Presbyterian church for whom this is not applicable. These are, like I said, the most cited exceptions. Elect 1 person to every meeting. Just say, okay, the presbytery is meeting in March March, May, September, November. Who wants March? Who wants May, September? Who wants November? That's fine. In your January meeting, elect one person to all four meetings if you haven't elected one person to each meeting. In the January meeting, elect one person for all of the meetings. Elect before each presbytery meeting. So in March or in February, you'd elect someone for March. In April, someone for May, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever you do, elect someone and put that in your minutes. Then the report to session by the commissioner, that can be oral, it can be written, just report. And make sure you note it in your minutes. Occasionally, someone will say, well, we did receive a report. But then when I go back and look at your minutes, there's no reference to that in your minutes. If it's not in your minutes, it didn't happen when it comes to the minute review. Item 10 asks you to set your dates for communion in advance. You can do it a month in advance. And so again, you can say in January, we're going to have communion on February 2nd. Or you can say in January, we are going to have communion on all of these dates, and you list them all out. You can say on the first Sunday of every month, we are going to celebrate communion. That's fine. But then keep in mind, if you have communion on Maundy Thursday, on Easter, on other days of the year, those days aren't included in the first Sunday of every month, or at least not necessarily. It is not enough for you to say in your minutes after the fact that you had communion. So in March, you're saying we had communion in February is nice information. It's good to know you had communion. But for these purposes, it's insufficient because the session has to vote to have communion. It's not a willy-nilly, let's just make a decision. The same is true for baptisms. Those have to be permitted in advance. So if the only reference to the baptism is that it happened last month, the reviewer may well and rightly find that to be an exception. When it comes to baptismal rolls and all rolls, paper is highly recommended. Technology is a wonderful thing. It's good for keeping quick track of things, and I'm all for it. But the truth is, we can read parchment from before Jesus's birth. But if I hand you a floppy disk from the first computer you ever had, chances are pretty good you would look at me with a blank stare. Technology has changed. In many ways, it's improved, but it hasn't improved in all ways. So keeping things on paper, I can't highly recommend it enough, but I also understand you can make your choices. But computers crash, paper is pretty safe if it's kept in a safe place. And do list all of the information that is requested in these items for review. List all of the information. Your records are a valuable tool, and not just for historical purposes, but somebody may want to join a church at a later date, and sometimes it's a much later date. My parents told me I was baptized in this church when I was an infant. I'm 27 now, and I'm getting married, and I want to join the church where we're getting married, and they need to have proof of my baptism. As Presbyterians, we believe in baptism once and for all. We don't rebaptize people. So to make sure people don't have to worry about if they hold to that same conviction, you may have the only proof in your baptismal rolls, in your session minutes, and the session minutes and the rolls you can use those to cross-reference if you need exact information, if it's not in both places, as I hope it would be. And so something for you to bear in mind. That same complete information is required with the transferal of members. Again, this may be the only record down the road of where someone was or where they went. And it comes up not as infrequently as one might think, where someone is trying to track that information down for some reason. If you look at question 17, you'll see regular, at least quarterly financial reports received by the session. And those reports should appear in your session minutes. We have too many instances of fraud in the world and in our churches. We have to stay on top of that. You need to have a session meeting at least quarterly. If you only meet quarterly, then at least every one of those meetings has to include a financial report that the session has reviewed. Item 18, the election of the treasurer by the session with lengths of term noted, or if previously elected, note the end of term. And in the same way, item 19, election of a clerk. Elect your treasurer, mark the date of their term, whether it's 1 year or several years. Elect your clerk, mark the date of their term, whether it's 1 year or several years. But you want to do this every year because you have to keep track. And so you may, if you don't do this every year, then you might have to go through the minutes for the previous years just to find a single line in your minutes. Do it every year in the same way that I recommend you put the complete list of the elders who are on session for a given year in the January minutes, so that in the January minutes you can go, okay, Joe Schmo was elected 2 years ago, and that was for a second term. That means this, this next year is going to be their last year, and they won't be able to re-up. All those things will be right at your disposal, so you can always keep track of first term or second term. And if you put your election of clerk and treasurer, even if you aren't electing them, you can just cite it as information so that easily that information is at hand. Okay, these items are in yellow here. They will be shaded in some fashion when you actually get the review form. I have said it in any number of situations, and I will say it again now, and I may end up saying it again later. We would love to see you achieve these trainings for boundary and anti-harassment training for session meetings by the end of this year. But it is not fair to demand it of you at the late date by which we've been able to give you information to complete these things. If you're able to do it in 2024, list it in your stated meetings who took the training since the last meeting. So if this is your February meeting, you can say these 3 people by name took the boundary and anti-harassment training for session members in January 2024. If it happens in every month, you'll just have a small list of people each time. But then what 22 is asking, item 22, is the last meeting of your year, November, December, list every person who took the training in 2025. So remember, when we're looking at the next review will be in 2026 for your 2025 minutes. So your 2025 minutes have to reflect the month by month training, and the last meeting in 2025 has to reflect everyone in a longer list who took the training, and I would advise what month they took the training. Again, to cross-reference, and it will take you very little time to have that complete information. But that will mean if you have 12 people on session, if you have 24 people on session, it is not a massive list. You can put it in multiple columns. None of that matters as much as having that information can. Item 23. Too often, churches don't really indicate their insurance information or where it can be found. Again, this would be a great thing to do in January to list who your insurer is, what the term of that insurance is, and then with this item 23, that's the page number that you will put on the review form. Item 25. Some of your churches will ask for an exemption from the Committee on Ministry regarding the election of officers. If you do this, you need to provide two page numbers in your minutes. The first page number is when you decided to ask for the exemption. And the second page number is when COM responded, and you put that response in your minutes. And I may even change the review form just so it's clear that you need two page numbers and why. Later on, I will also be talking about official correspondence from the presbytery. If you ask for an exemption and you get an exemption, that is an official correspondence. So you need to make sure that not only in this item 25, but later on when we get to items of official correspondence from the presbytery or another council, that you list it there. Don't forget, it's the session's responsibility to examine people for ordination, to provide training, and the presbytery offers a training that they can take. And we've done it at least for the last several years. And so someone could take a previous year's training if that's the one you assign. If they're new, they will not have done it. It's still good learning for them. And it's the session's responsibility for ordination and installation. Items 27, 28, and 29 point again to the session's fiduciary responsibility. Annual statements and annual review of financial records by an auditor or an auditor team are necessary. And you can see in our financial management handbook on the Presbytery's website ways in which those things can happen. And the session is responsible for overseeing any financial records for any church organization over which the session has responsibility. It is up to your session to decide what things make sense for you to oversee and what things maybe are better for you not to oversee. You may want to talk to your insurer to see if they have recommendations of what organizations make more sense than others. Presbyterian women, that may make perfect sense. The Boy Scouts, one would highly recommend you not oversee their books. But those are decisions your session has to make, but then you have to abide by the consequences of those things. Item 26, the budget established and approved annually by the session. That often appears in as a note taken for the meeting, but that is not always included in the minutes. It needs to be in the minutes. It's not enough just to say we approved it. You have to show what it was. Yes. I'll mention in a few minutes about, well, actually, we can do it here. The congregational meeting, those minutes have to appear in the session records. And so that'll be coming up on the next slide, actually. What some churches do is they include the whole annual report. Again, it's a judgment call. On one hand, they can get very lengthy. The paper can be expensive. You may not want to include everything in there, and that is understandable. On the other hand, it is a way to record your congregation's history in the most secure way possible. It'll be in the minutes. The minutes are kept in a safe place. At some point, the minutes will be sent to a disaster proof room at the Presbyterian Historical Society. And the history of your church will be kept safe for a long time in a way that just putting annual reports into a folder doesn't necessarily assure. That, again, is your call. I don't really have an opinion. You just need to do what you feel you need to do. Remember that both congregational and corporate business can be done at the same meeting. And in most cases, the business of those two are the same. And if you plan your corporate meeting out adequately, the corporate meeting can confirm the actions of the congregational meeting. So you don't need to weave back and forth. You can open one, open the second, close, close. I mentioned earlier about official communication. So often that is left blank or N/A for not applicable. And generally speaking, I shake my head. Whenever you receive something directed to your congregation specifically, that's an official communication. So if you get a general letter or an email from the presbytery that's a mass mailing, don't worry about that. Presbytery meeting is going to be on May 11th, and we're telling everybody. Now you know, and that's good. On the other hand, if you get a letter saying, Church X, this is your per capita, this is the amount we are anticipating from you for this year. Or if you get a letter from the Presbytery office saying, this is your quarterly statement on how much you have paid on your per capita. When COM tells you you can start your pastoral search, that is an official communication. Just like Sonia's email to you is about the completion of your minute review. So when you finish the minute review and then you get the sheet at the end or an email saying there were so many exceptions or no exceptions, and here are the comments, that is an official communication from the presbytery. That also means, in terms of item 41, because the minute review is an official communication, you have to tell the session how it's gone. You have to tell them where you're finding needs to improve. Don't take it personally when you're presenting it. Don't apologize. None of that is necessary. We'll talk a little bit more about exceptions and what they mean. You are there to remind the session of what is necessary for them to do to record what's happened. You don't make it happen. If you are on session as an elder at the same time as you're the clerk, you can do your part. You can make motions, you can speak in a more direct way. But as the clerk, you work with the moderator, you work with the rest of the session. You say, oh, we still have to do this year. And you do what you can to make that happen. If you're an elder, you can make that motion if you wish. Items 45 and 46 highlighted here and in some kind of shading on the official form. Again, if you have approved an anti-racism policy, an anti-harassment policy in 2024, it would be great to see that listed in the review. However, if this couldn't happen in time for 2024, know that it is required in 2025. Okay, in conclusion, You'll see we need a signature of the clerk, we need the minutes of a church, and approved without exception, with however many exceptions, or not approved. An exception is an omission or an error. It may feel like we're keeping score. We're really not, but we do have to report these things to the presbytery. So we're keeping score in the sense that the presbytery will know that the Presbyterian Church of East Overshoe had 3 exceptions, and we will have in our records what those 3 exceptions were, because with the item number, they will have been listed on the form. But we don't track from year to year to see if you keep getting the same thing incorrect or you keep omitting the same thing. We don't see if you got 5 exceptions last year and you only had 3 this year, and isn't that a great thing to celebrate? We don't look at it that way. The only time we go and compare year to year is when an item has raised a concern. So if we see that this is not the first year that your session hasn't met quarterly, or that you have not done a financial audit in the past year, we will let COM know, because they will be making an inquiry. If there are policies you should have, but you don't seem to have, again, we'll let COM know and they will be in touch. But overall, we aren't grading you. This isn't a class where you get a grade, an A or an F. The point of the review is to make sure that your minutes are as complete and accurate as possible. And if they aren't, then it's best someone helps you find that so you can fix it for the next time. And people have asked, can they fix omissions or errors after the minutes have been reviewed once you see them? No, you cannot. Because the minutes that were approved are the minutes that are in your session minutes. So you can't change something that has already been approved, even if it was wrong. What you can do, if it means that much to you, is when you give the minute review, for example, and you say, we got this exception on this because we neglected to, and then you can put in what should have been there, right? Or information that was missed, you can add that. But you can't change what has already been approved. You can, however, make editorial corrections. So if you misspelled a word or something like that, you can fix those, but you can't change anything of substance. This form will ask where there are errors or omissions, and it will ask for the item number. And that's so that when you get your review form back and it says item 13, and then whatever item 13 is, you can go right back and look at it. If it just said exception, you didn't have the dates of the Lord's Supper in advance. Well, you'd have to go through the form to find out where that was, to see, oh, what page numbers did I put? Where did that go? By having the item number, that makes that easier. And I will say, when it comes to, oh, didn't I put that in there? Sometimes, and there are different reasons why this could happen, I suppose, a person will put the wrong page number on the review form. And so the reviewer goes and looks on page 9 and goes kind of crazy looking for baptism that's been approved. You told them it was on page 9. They're looking on page 9. They're not seeing it. You can either, as the reviewer, look on page 8 and page 10, see if it shows up in one of those places in case the wrong page number was listed. But that's really an act of kindness on your part. I'm all for kindness. I'm certainly keen to have you do this. But if a person is in a rush because the deadline is June 1st and they got it late and they're just now getting to it and it has to be in, they might look at page 9. And if it's not on page 9, then it's an exception. even if had they looked another page, they might have found it. And I have seen things where it's ended up on a page, not one page removed, but several pages removed. And someone will email me and say, no, it's here. And I'll say, I'm looking, I'm not seeing it. They'll tell me what page. And I'll be, well, you said this page and it's way over there. There's no way I would have seen that. And again, then it's up to me as the reviewer to say, they had it. That's not the most helpful, but they had it. And so I'm not going to make it an exception. Or they can say, look, the review form is our way of tracking this. It was in the wrong spot. That's going to have to be commented on. And I'll mention that in a moment. So we want you to give wherever there are exceptions, but this isn't just about where did you go wrong. There's also commendations. Maybe these are really neat minutes, as in they're formatted, they're easy to read, they're clear, they're crisp. You've bold-faced things, you've underlined things, you've used numbers to list things. These minutes are a dream to read. Write that down. Comments might include who knows what. Anything that you saw. That I like the way you did this note taking. Mine are much longer and yours are so succinct. I'm really going to remember that for the future. So exceptions, commendations, comments, and then finally, do these minutes reflect being sent by a friend among your colleagues in ministry? And you might remember that from the ordination questions. And basically what that means is, were these minutes prepared and provided in a way that this is easy to do? It can be tedious. I mean, I'm the last one to say they're not, when at the end of this process, I might have many minutes I have to review. You all generally just have to do one, but even one can be kind of slogging. I understand. But we can make it easy. We can make it clear. I don't want anyone to have hurt feelings over what I'm about to say. And I don't mean any offense to anybody, but sometimes when they're copied or scanned, the page numbers are too light to read because you didn't write arc enough if you wrote it in. If you type it in, that's less of a problem. And so the review form is going to come in a Word document. We aren't going to play with Excel anymore, just Word. Maybe the person didn't put page numbers in despite my saying put page numbers in half a dozen times today. And so you get this big document, and if you're going to try and review their minutes, you might say, okay, I'm going to go through one by one for all these questions, see what I can find. Maybe you do it. I'm not sure I'd recommend you do it. I mean, if there's time, send it back to the person and say, or send it back to Sonia and say, there's no page numbers here. I can't do anything. And Sonia will get in touch with that church, or you can direct your comments to them and say, I need something with page numbers. Probably best to work with Sonia just so that she gets that copy as well. Sometimes because of the way printers work, when you scan a document, they sometimes come out funny. And so things aren't in the proper page number. If there is a technical problem where you don't have a scanner, you don't know how to use a scanner, you don't want to know how to use a scanner, get in touch with Sonia. And she can talk you through ways in which maybe you can email her your minutes and she'll scan them for you. She's glad to do those things. But if you are looking at your document the last time before you send it in to Sonia or to your partner, and if you look at it and go, yeah, those page numbers are a little lighter than I thought they'd be, go back and fix it. If you discover the page numbers are not in order or don't exist, go back and fix it. Write them in and then scan them again. Do for another clerk what you hope the other clerk would do for you if they realized this is going to be a real bother. Make it as easy as you can. Be a friend among your colleagues in ministry by providing them something that's easy to work with. And make those deadlines that I mentioned earlier, both for submitting your worksheet and your review of another person's minutes. When you don't meet those deadlines, somebody else is getting stressed. You might be stressed because you haven't met that deadline, but Sonia and I might be getting stressed because we're getting close to the end. And while we'd like to go, hey, it's their problem if they get their minutes in on time, we want you to succeed. So we want you to get them in on time. And if your reviewer gets it and it's closer to the deadline than is helpful to them, we've given you that date in May. If you get it to them by that date in May, they've got about 2 weeks until June 1st. That can be plenty of time to do that review. You get it in later than that, that isn't helpful. It's just more stress. Nobody appreciates an additional source of stress. So please make those deadlines. And you certainly don't want the stress of hearing from Sonia multiple times saying, we haven't received this from you yet, or we still need this. You don't want the stress of my contacting you and saying, look, if we don't get this soon, we're just going to mark it as not approved. Nobody wants that. And we don't want to cause it. So the best we can do all the things we can, keep things decently and in order. Once you meet in early 2025 as a session and approve your last minutes from 2024, those minutes are official. So you'll have until May 19th, which is weeks after Easter, to complete a review that asks essentially 46 questions of you, some of which require multiple answers and many of which you don't have to say much at all. I wish we had more baptisms. But most churches, if you had a handful or more, you'll be able to find those soon enough. And don't forget that most of the review form from last year is the same as this. I will be doing the same thing as a presbytery review form for the synod, where I can go through today and start filling out the review form. And if there are places where we don't have the official notice, well, you can mark that in a way that you know you've got to go back and confirm that ends up being the page number. But once you can assemble the minutes into one big file, you know what your page numbers will be for the review process. And then you can start to get that in order. But in my case, I'll go through and say, one of the questions is, did we celebrate the Lord's Supper at a presbytery meeting? Well, I can mark down, we did in May and we did in September, because those are the months we have communion. I don't need to look that up. I can just, when we get to that point, just track down that page number. I don't have to wonder about which meeting that happened in. And you can do that for anything. You did the audit in May. Now you know you just need to go back to the May minutes and find the specific page number. So, thank you for your time. Be a friend among your colleagues in ministry and make your work clear, legible, and get it in on time. And know that we as a presbytery are here to help you and to have us help each other. And so, again, if you've got questions, Sonia is a great source of information. I'm glad to answer questions. You can call anytime, you can email anytime, and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. Together we can get this done. Well, thank you again for your time, and peace be with you.